How the fuck is it hot at night?
South of Atlanta, long before the massive movie studios arrived, and long before the sprawling subdivisions carved up the land, Fayette County was a place defined by its isolation. It was a patchwork of quiet farming communities, separated by miles and miles of dense, suffocating Georgia pine. Even today, if you turn off the main highways and drift onto the back roads, you can still feel it. The modern world falls away, the tree canopy closes in overhead, and the darkness takes on a heavy, physical weight. Jenkins Road is one of those places. During the day, it's just another stretch of pavement winding through Tyrone, but at night, the trees seem to lean closer to the asphalt. The headlights of your car only cut so far into the blackness before the woods swallow the light entirely. It is a liminal space, a place where you feel like you are being watched by things that belong to the deep woods. To understand what happened here, you have to strip away the asphalt. You have to imagine Jenkins Road in the 1930s. No streetlights, no nearby hum of highway traffic, just a narrow, rutted dirt road cutting through a tunnel of old-growth timber. It was a late summer night. A local family was making the long drive home after dark. In those days, a pickup truck was a workhorse, not a luxury, and it was entirely common for the children of a family to ride in the open bed of the truck while the parents sat in the cab. If you've ever ridden in the back of a truck at night, you know the exact feeling. The rush of the warm night air, the hypnotic, rhythmic bouncing of the suspension over the dirt roads, the canopy of trees passing overhead, briefly revealing the stars before hiding them again. It's a feeling of total freedom, but also total exposure. You are completely vulnerable to the elements, separated from the safety of the cab by a pane of dirty glass. As the truck turned onto Jenkins Road, the children sat huddled together in the bed, watching the dark trees roll by. The glow of the taillights painted the dust kicking up behind them in a dim red haze. The engine rumbled, steady and loud, drowning out the sound of the crickets and the cicadas. But it didn't drown out the sound of the air shifting above them. Something was pacing the truck. Up in the heavy branches, hidden by the choking blackness of the canopy, something massive was moving in tandem with the vehicle. The children couldn't see it, but the atmosphere in the bed of the truck changed instantly. The carefree joy of the ride evaporated, replaced by a sudden, primal dread. The kind of cold, sinking terror that raises the hair on the back of your arms and tells your nervous system that you are no longer the predator. You are the prey. They looked up at the sky. A shadow, darker than the night around them, blotted out the stars. It was descending, fast. There was no time to scream. There was no time to bang on the glass and alert their parents in the cab. With a heavy, unnatural thud, the suspension of the truck groaned. The rear bumper dipped toward the dirt. Something had just landed in the bed of the truck with them. The children froze, their breath caught in their throats, paralyzed by a terror so absolute it felt like they were suffocating. Crouched right there in the rusted metal bed, illuminated only by the faint, bouncing ambient light of the taillights reflecting off the dust, was a creature that defied any natural explanation. It was massive, taller and wider than a man, but it was not human. It possessed enormous, leathery wings that were currently folded tight against a dark, hulking body. It didn't thrash, it didn't attack, and somehow, that made it infinitely worse. It just sat there, perfectly still, and it looked at them, its eyes locked onto the terrified children, burning with an intense, unblinking awareness. This was not a mindless animal that had accidentally fallen from a tree. This was an entity that had chosen to drop into that truck. It had calculated the speed, matched the trajectory, and landed mere feet away from them, simply to let them know it was there. For several agonizing seconds, time stopped on Jenkins Road. The truck continued to bounce down the dirt path, the parents in the cab completely oblivious to the nightmare unfolding just inches behind their heads. The children were trapped in a silent standoff, staring into the face of something that belonged in the darkest corners of an ancient myth, not the back of a Ford pickup in rural Georgia. And then, as suddenly as it had arrived, the standoff ended. The creature did not make a sound. It didn't push off the metal or shake the truck. It simply unfurled its massive wings, caught the rushing wind, and lifted effortlessly off the metal bed. The children watched, trembling, as the immense black shape was swallowed back up by the night sky, disappearing into the canopy of the pines. The truck suspension leveled out. The oppressive, heavy weight in the air lifted. The children were left alone in the dark, staring at the empty space where the monster had been just seconds before. When they finally made it home and spilled the story to their parents, it was met with the kind of disbelief you would expect. A trick of the light, a large owl, a shared nightmare born from the spooky shadows of the road. But the children knew what they had shared the truck bed with. They knew the heavy physical impact of its landing and the terrifying intelligence in the way it had stared them down. The legend of the Jenkins Road Stowaway became a quiet whisper in Fayette County. It wasn't widely publicized. It was the kind of story passed down on front porches and around campfires, a cautionary tale about the things that rule the woods when the sun goes down. When you drive down Jenkins Road today, you might be in a modern car with the doors locked and the air conditioning running. But as you pass beneath those old, towering pines, look in your rearview mirror. Watch the red glow of your taillights against the tree line, and ask yourself, if something were to drop out of the canopy right now, how long would it take you to realize you weren't driving alone? There's a boundary line where the charm of Sonoya bleeds out into something much older and much darker. If you leave the manicured streets and the film sets behind, and you drive far enough into the heavy Georgia pines, the pavement eventually gives way to dirt. That dirt leads to Paget Road. Out there, spanning a deep, overgrown ravine, sits the rotting skeleton of an abandoned railroad trestle. The iron rails were torn up and sold for scrap a lifetime ago, leaving nothing but massive wooden pilings soaked in creosote and choked by vines. It is a place that feels completely cut off from the rest of the world. And if you stand beneath it as the sun goes down, you start to understand why the locals refuse to talk about it. They call it the Paget Road Hanging Grounds. The story goes back to the late 19th century, a time when the deep woods of the Southern Crescent were essentially lawless. Justice out here wasn't handed down by a judge. It was decided by angry men in the dark. A local man, known to history only as Old Man Paget, had taken a prisoner. Whoever this captive was, and whatever he supposedly did, has been completely erased from the records. Paget didn't want a trial. He wanted a permanent, quiet solution. Under the cover of night, Paget dragged the condemned man out to the very center of that wooden trestle. Suspended high above the black ravine, with no one around for miles, Paget tied a thick rope to the heavy wooden crossbeams. The execution was set, but the woods had other plans. In a final, desperate surge of adrenaline, the prisoner broke free from his bindings. A brutal, chaotic struggle erupted in the pitch black. The two men fought on the edge of the abyss, slipping on the narrow cross ties. And in that violent scramble, the tables turned. The prisoner overpowered Paget. He forced the old man over the edge of his own bridge. The rope snapped tight. The executioner was hanged in the dark, swaying silently beneath the trestle, while the prisoner scrambled down into the pines and was never seen again. Today, if you walk out to that bridge, you can feel that the violence never really left. The first thing you notice is the sound, or rather, the absolute lack of it. People who trespass out there report stepping into a sonic vacuum. 1 second, you are surrounded by the deafening roar of cicadas and the wind in the trees. The next second, as you step into the shadow of the bridge, everything goes dead silent. The air pressure drops. The woods hold their breath. And then the phantom train arrives. Even though the tracks have been gone for decades, people standing on the rotting wood report hearing a piercing, mournful steam whistle echoing through the trees. Then comes the vibration. You can feel the massive weight of iron wheels grinding against phantom rails, violently shaking the bridge beneath your feet. It sounds so real, so physically present, that terrified teenagers have thrown themselves off the trestle into the dirt below to avoid being crushed by a locomotive that isn't there. If you pick yourself up from the dirt and look back toward the pilings where Old Man Paget died, you might just see them. Thick, unnatural shadow figures, detaching themselves from the rotting wood, darting through the brush just outside your flashlight beam, waiting for the next train to roll through. If you try to seek out the Paget Road hanging grounds today, you will quickly hit a dead end. The land surrounding that rotting trestle has been swallowed up by modern private property lines. The woods are gated off. The old path is sealed. You cannot legally reach the bridge anymore. But the dark energy of this area isn't just confined to the wooden pilings of the trestle. It bleeds out into the surrounding soil. And before you even reach that private driveway, sitting quietly off to the right side of the dirt road is the perimeter guard, an ancient, forgotten cemetery. It is the kind of graveyard that time has actively tried to erase. The headstones are crumbling, choked by thick Georgia ivy and stained black by decades of suffocating humidity and neglect. Many of the names have been entirely worn away by the elements, leaving only jagged teeth of stone jutting out from the uneven, sunken earth. It is a haunting, beautiful piece of tangible history sitting just on the edge of the property line, and it is absolutely worth pulling over to document. But the locals who still live out here will tell you to strictly observe one cardinal rule. You only visit in the daylight. There is a heavy, resentful atmosphere that settles over these graves as soon as the sun dips beneath the pine canopy. The people buried in this dirt lived brutal lives during a lawless, violent era of the Southern Crescent. And whatever rests beneath those leaning stones is undeniably restless. Those who have lingered too long after dusk report an overwhelming sensation of being cornered by something deeply hostile. The ambient temperature plummets. Unexplained dense shadows seem to detach from the tree line and shift between the cracked granite markers. There is a palpable, aggressive energy pushing against you, a silent but absolute demand to leave the area immediately. The residents of this cemetery are profoundly unhappy. They do not appreciate nighttime visitors. And standing out there in the suffocating dark, listening to the dead silence of the woods, you get the distinct feeling that if you don't turn around and get back in your car, you might just become a permanent part of the grounds.
Old South Spook trip, I'm sliding through the swamp. Black pines, mud on the Thames, hit a base when it dropped. Demons in the tree line, ops on my prey. I don't flinch, I just grin when the whole place shakes. Old South Spook trip, yeah, I came for the wreck. Heavy in the trunk, not a floor but the crack.
There is a stretch of land in the southern part of Fayette County that feels like it was deliberately left behind by the rest of the world. If you drive south from Fayetteville, the sprawling subdivisions slowly fade away, replaced by collapsing barns, rusted wire fences, and dense, suffocating tree lines. Eventually, you cross into Woolsey. Today, Woolsey is barely more than a quiet crossroads and a memory. But surrounding this sleepy community is a massive, sprawling network of deep wetlands and blackwater swamps. It is an environment that swallows sound, swallows light, and according to the generational lore of the Southern Crescent, swallows people. If you pull your car off to the side of a dirt road near the edge of the Woolsey wetlands on a sweltering summer night, you are immediately hit by the physical weight of the air. The humidity is oppressive. The smell of rotting vegetation and stagnant water fills your lungs, and as your eyes finally adjust to the pitch black, you might notice something moving deep within the tree line. A light. It doesn't look like a flashlight beam, and it certainly isn't the harsh white glare of an LED. It is a soft, flickering, amber glow. It hovers just a few feet off the ground, moving with a slow, deliberate, almost hypnotic rhythm. To understand what you are looking at, you have to rewind the clock to 1864. General William Tecumseh Sherman was carving his fiery path of destruction through Georgia, and the Union Army was closing in on Fayette County. Panic swept through the isolated farmsteads. Families desperately scrambled to hide whatever wealth they had left from the approaching soldiers. One of those men was a wealthy landowner named Thomas Gay. According to the local archives, Gay gathered a massive fortune in family silver and gold, packed it into heavy iron lockboxes, and vanished into the deepest, most treacherous part of the Woolsey swamp under the cover of darkness. He buried his treasure where no Union soldier would ever dare to march. He intended to dig it up once the war was over, but Thomas Gay never got the chance. He died shortly after the war ended, taking the exact location of his buried fortune to the grave. Or so the story goes. Locals will tell you that death didn't stop him from looking. That slow, amber glow drifting through the cypress trees is Thomas Gay. For over a century, His spirit has been condemned to wander the black mud of the wetlands, holding a phantom lantern, methodically searching for the silver he buried and lost. If you watch that slow, amber light, it almost feels peaceful, a tragic, quiet piece of lingering history. But not all the lights in the Woolsey woods are slow. If you stand out by the edge of that swamp long enough, the atmosphere shifts, the temperature drops. The deafening choir of the tree frogs abruptly goes dead silent, and deep in the woods, the soft amber glow is replaced by something entirely different. A sharp, erratic, piercing blue-white light. It doesn't glide, it darts. It flashes wildly between the trees, moving with a frantic, chaotic, terrifying speed. It jerks up into the canopy, then plummets down to the waterline, zigzagging violently as if it is in a state of absolute, blinding panic. That light does not belong to a Civil War farmer looking for lost silver. That light belongs to the Roaring Twenties. During the height of Prohibition, the isolated swamps of Woolsey were a haven for moonshiners and bootleggers, and the law out here was controlled by a deeply corrupt, notoriously violent local sheriff. He ran the county with an iron fist, taking a cut of the illegal liquor trade and silencing anyone who dared to challenge his authority. If you asked too many questions, or if you got on the sheriff's bad side, you didn't get a trial. You simply disappeared. The Woolsey swamp became a dumping ground. It was the perfect place to make a body vanish. The deep black water and the sinking mud swallowed the sheriff's victims without a trace. Their murders were never investigated. Their disappearances were never explained. They were entirely erased from existence. But the earth remembers violence. Those frantic, erratic lights, violently tearing through the darkness, are said to be the residual energy of the sheriff's victims. They are trapped in a perpetual state of terror, reliving the final, desperate moments of their lives as they were hunted down in the swamp. They aren't searching for buried treasure. They are running for their lives. So, if you find yourself wandering the back roads of Woolsey after midnight, and you pull over to look out into the suffocating dark of the wetlands, pay very close attention to what you see. If you see a slow, steady amber glow, you are perfectly safe. You are just watching an old ghost look for his silver. But if the woods go quiet and you see a frantic, jagged light violently tearing through the trees, get back in your car, turn off your headlights, and pray whatever is hunting them out there in the dark doesn't notice you. If you keep driving south past the haunted wetlands of Woolsey and the rotting trestles of Sonoya, the landscape begins to shift. You cross the county line into Pike County, leaving the suburban sprawl of the South Metro permanently in your rearview mirror. Down here, the paved roads are an afterthought. The world is dominated by ancient, towering pines, sprawling agricultural fields, and deep, winding waterways that cut through the red Georgia clay. One of those waterways is Elkins Creek. On the surface, Elkins Creek looks exactly like 1,000 other forgotten waterways in the Southern Crescent. It is slow-moving, choked with thick brush, and shrouded in a canopy so dense that the water looks pitch black even at high noon. It is a place frequented only by local fishermen, hunters, and the occasional trespasser looking to get lost in the woods. But in these woods, getting lost is exactly what you should be afraid of. Because unlike the ghosts of Sonoya or the phantom lanterns of Woolsey, the horror of Elkins Creek isn't an echo of the past. It is something physical. It is something massive, and it leaves a trail. The Elkins Creek incident didn't begin with a sighting. It began with the mud. Following a heavy summer rainstorm, a local resident was walking the muddy banks of the creek, deep in the thickest part of the woods. The air was heavy, suffocating, and dead quiet. As they navigated the slick, uneven terrain, they stopped dead in their tracks. Imprinted in the soft, wet clay of the creek bank was a footprint. But it wasn't human, and it wasn't a bear. It was a massive, bare, humanoid footprint, measuring nearly 18 inches long and disproportionately wide. It was pressed so deeply into the dense Georgia clay that water had already begun to pool in the heel. When you find something like that in the absolute middle of nowhere, your brain desperately tries to rationalize it. You tell yourself it's a prank, a hoax, someone out in the woods messing around. But then you look ahead. There wasn't just one track. There was a continuous, unbroken trail of them, emerging from the deep water of the creek, marching straight up the steep, muddy embankment and disappearing into the impenetrable wall of pine trees. The sheer physical mechanics of the tracks were terrifying. The stride length between each print was nearly 5 feet. No human being could take a casual 5-foot step up a steep, slick, muddy bank. Furthermore, the depth of the impressions indicated that whatever made them possessed an incomprehensible physical mass. To sink that deeply into the packed clay, the creature would have to weigh somewhere between 600 and 800 pounds. It walked on 2 legs. It possessed impossible strength, and it was moving with absolute, silent purpose through the woods. But the tracks were only the beginning of the nightmare. Those who have ventured out to Elkins Creek searching for the creature quickly realize that you do not hunt whatever is living in these woods. It hunts you. The phenomena usually begin at dusk. Much like the hanging grounds of Sonoya, the environment around Elkins Creek will suddenly shift. The natural sounds of the forest will abruptly stop. The frogs, the crickets, the birds, everything goes dead silent, as if the entire ecosystem has been paralyzed by the arrival of a singular apex predator. Then the woods begin to speak. It starts with the physical vibration of a heavy impact, a massive hollow thud echoing through the trees, like someone taking a heavy wooden baseball bat to the trunk of a massive oak. A few seconds later, from a different direction, another impact. It is a deliberate, coordinated display of sheer physical strength. Wood knocks. The sound of something massive communicating in the dark, signaling that you have officially crossed the line into its territory. If you don't heed the warning and leave immediately, the auditory assault escalates. Witnesses have reported hearing a vocalization so deep and so gutturally loud that it vibrates inside their chest cavity. It does not sound like a coyote. It does not sound like a bear. It is described as a deafening, metallic screech that transitions into a low, roaring growl, completely drowning out the ambient noise of the creek. It is a sound designed to induce absolute, primal panic. The most terrifying aspect of the Elkins Creek incident is the realization of what it represents. When you are dealing with a haunting, you are dealing with memory. You are dealing with the lingering energy of the dead. You can tell yourself it can't physically hurt you, but the entity at Elkins Creek breathes. It bleeds. It possesses massive physical weight, and it stalks the riverbanks under the cover of darkness. It proves that the woods of the Southern Crescent aren't just hiding history. They are hiding a biological anomaly, a massive, undiscovered stowaway living right on the edge of civilization. If you ever find yourself driving down a dirt road in Pike County, and you decide to take a walk along the banks of Elkins Creek, keep your eyes on the mud. If you see a track that is too big, pressed too deeply into the earth, don't pull out your camera. Don't follow the trail into the brush. Turn around, walk quietly back to your car, and understand that you are standing in the territory of something that has perfectly adapted to the dark. And if you can see its footprints, there is a very good chance it is already watching you.
Old South spook trip, I'm sliding through the swamp. Black pines, Mountain Thames, hit a bass when it drops. Demons in the tree line, ops on my tail. I don't flinch, I just grin when the whole place shakes. Old South spook trip, yeah, I came for the wreck. Heavy in the trunk, now the phone about to crack, 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 crack. trip, I'm sliding through the swamp. Black pines, muddy Thames, hit a bass when it drops. Demons in the tree